This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. Joining me this week, two star children here to set humanity on the path to the future, Kate Scotchless.
Hello.
And Kara Szymborski.
Hi.
I love that you make us sound like cult leaders.
I mean, am I wrong? So thank you guys for joining me this week on episode 271 of I Read Comic Books. Before we get the show started, I do want to send a special shout out to Jeff, Danny, Tom, and Stephanie, who all sent us in very lovely, very tear-worthy voicemails on last week's episode. It was truly heartwarming to hear from you all. And honestly, I encourage everybody to send us in voicemails. You want to talk about comic books, you want to send us in something to play on the show, we'll figure out a way to get it played live on the episode so we can react to it and stuff. That's what we were trying to do last week, but we ran into some technical difficulties. But anyways, those voicemails were amazing. The four of you are absolute beautiful star children, and we love you so very much. Everyone here at I Read Comic Books was swelling with the love that you guys sent over. So thank you so much for that. It was truly like the nicest thing I've heard in a very long time. But yeah, let's get into this show. Let's talk about comic books. It's a thing that, I just like to do, and we've been doing it for like 6 years, so I figure we might as well do it for 6 more. How have you guys been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Kara.
All right. I know this sounds crazy, but I went into an actual comic book store for the first time in like 6 years.
Gasp.
Okay, if you cough at any time in this recording.
Right. So, okay. But the reason I went into the store is because, first of all, I decided to go on a day when it was snowing in the middle of the day, assuming correctly that no one else would willingly be doing like any kind of errand that wasn't totally necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I called the shop beforehand to specifically ask what their COVID procedures were to see if it was even a space I wanted to go to. And when I arrived, I saw that their door was propped open, and I thought, you understand airflow.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like masks. Everyone, when they walked in, had to sanitize their hands. There was one other person in the shop, and so I just like walked to the back of the shop while they were at the front at the register. And I just kind of felt like, I don't like all this COVID variant news, and I feel like I'm not going to be able to go to stores anytime soon. So I'm going to just go like impulse shop the comic store and then like not worry about it for 6 months.
Yeah.
So you stocked up on 6 months worth of comics is what I'm hearing.
Well, no, but I was also just kind of like, God, I really hate that we're in a situation where you kind of have to shop big box stores because they're the people who are delivering. And I'd really like to take every opportunity possible to shop locally. So
does your shop not do curbside? Our local ones are all doing curbside if you call and ask and stuff.
It wasn't clear. And I was just kind of like, part of the magic of going into a comic book store or bookstore is that you don't know what you're going to get ahead of time.
Exactly.
You're just
it
waiting.
Really doesn't work that way.
Right. So I went to pick up the copy of Immortal Wonder Woman that I talked about, I think on the show a few weeks ago. So I picked up that, and I picked up, I impulse bought Bandette Volume 1, which was digital first, like a million years ago. And I didn't realize that it had been printed. So I bought Volume 1 of that because I loved that story. And then I also got, what did I get? I got a non-comic book that was definitely one of like the impulse buy things. There was like this enormous paperback about Disney Imagineering, and I flipped through it, and it's just like full of all of these like close-up shots of all these details in the Disney parks. And the Disney parks as a concept have become a pandemic coping mechanism for me. So I was like, obviously I'm buying this book, but this design looks a little outdated. So I flipped to the front and look at the copyright, and this book is from like 1996. And I was like, who has been carrying this new book around since 1996 waiting for somebody to buy it? Like, this store has not existed that long. This store has only existed for like less than 10 years. I'm like, who has been hoarding this Disney Imagineering book, but it just kind of reminded me of something that the owner of my previous local comic shop that I went to when I was younger used to say all the time. One of his like catchphrases was "everything sells." It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be for 10 years, but eventually someone will buy the thing at a price.
Right.
So that just kind of reminded me of that.
It's the free market at work, okay?
Yeah, so, that was like my comic experience, but kind of tying together the comic experience and the Disney experience. So maybe about a month ago, Mike, you were telling me, I think on one of our lovely I Read Comic Books Discord hangouts, that there are, in fact, Kingdom Hearts manga that, because I was talking about Kingdom Hearts and how I'd never played it, but I'm not like a video game person, so this is not a huge surprise. But like my understanding from friends who have played it is that the plot is confusing or non-existent, and that's when Mike told me that that's why they made manga, because everyone thought that, so the manga is the plot. So I read volumes 1 and 2 of Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, which, thank you, Mike, for sending me those links and telling me that was like the plot of the first video game. And so having not played the video game, which is like Disney characters and Final Fantasy characters mixed together in a new adventure, right? Sort of. Yeah. So I have not played these games, went in kind of blind, just being like, Disney characters, give me solace. And it's just so interesting reading this manga, because as a manga, it's actually not bad. Like the art quality is pretty great. There's a lot of like the stylistic beats that you expect from manga that you don't see as much in American style comic books, where there'll be like a few panels just to like set a mood or like zoom in on a detail that we don't see as often, because we've got stricter layouts and less of like the atmospheric elements that manga tend to have. And there were like a few things that were confusing to me. Like the book starts with Sora, Riku, and Kairi on an island, and they're all hanging out, and then all of a sudden, boom, plot begins, and everyone's off the island. And I'm like, what? But then I remembered that, like, I vaguely remember that being part of Dragon Ball Z also, like just randomly characters are places and you don't know why, but you're like, and now plot. So
as someone that's currently reading through Dragon Ball, like the opening is just like Goku comes across Bulma, and then the story continues. You're like, why? And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. They're trying to find Dragon Balls.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Kingdom Hearts Final Mix volumes were actually pretty interesting, because and again, I don't know how it is with the video game, but they hop around to all these different like worlds where these different Disney properties are happening, and it's kind of like the plot of that Disney movie happens in miniature, but the things driving the plot now become like Sora and his Keyblade weapon thing. So I thought that was extremely interesting and well done. Knowing that this was based off of a video game helped me understand some weird parts in the plot where it felt like something superfluous had been cut. Like I could tell that maybe there used to be a side quest here, but it's not relevant to the plot, so it's not here.
Yeah. And so they just explain it away really quickly.
Yeah, so they're just like, oh, now we'll do this thing. And I'm like, okay, so a foundational part of my identity as a high schooler was rewatching over and over again this pre-YouTube video about Kingdom Hearts and how nothing happens in it. So I was going into this manga being like, they're going to be in Hollow Bastion for 1,000 years just doing errands, and they were in Hollow Bastion for like a page. And so I'm like, okay, so I understand now why people are frustrated with this game if so little of it is relevant to the actual plot. So I thought the art was good. I thought the plot overall, like, I could follow it. I have questions, but I'm guessing I'm in a better place than maybe people who played the game.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the game or the manga is that like it's straightforward, whereas I think the games themselves are very convoluted, like unnecessarily so, in order to create like cinematic moments, whereas the manga just has to keep going, right? Like, there's no like you choose your own pace. Like the manga is the pace of the comic or the story. So it's really interesting.
So two things I want to say. I understand that in the video games there's a character named Roxas, but Roxas does not exist in this manga. So I guess Roxas was the character that like was your avatar within this world or something.
I have no idea.
I don't know. So Roxas doesn't exist in this manga. So I figured like that's because Roxas / the player is superfluous to the plot.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I want to say is like the main character Sora, who's got this keyblade thing he's got to go around like closing the gaps between worlds or whatever, is like also sort of trying to save his like friend girl from the island. It was like him and this dude Riku and this girl Kairi, and so they're both like trying to save Kairi because her heart's been stolen or something. But I get by the end of this manga that I'm supposed to be shipping Sora and Kairi and think, oh, like, that's cute, they'll end up together. But there should then maybe not be so much chemistry between Sora and Riku. Like, they've got a whole, like, we used to be friends and now we're enemies tension going on. And they had, like, a really heartfelt moment on this island before they all got separated. And Riku started getting, like, seduced by the dark side, with like Maleficent being the big bad of this story. And I mean, like,
how cool is that?
Right, but I'm like, but Sora and Riku definitely have more chemistry than just Sora and Kairi being like, oh, but she's the girl and you saved her. It's like way more interesting to see the relationship between Sora and Riku, whether that ends up being romantic or not. But like, then why would you have so much tension if you don't want me to think that?
Right.
So that's my Kingdom Hearts update.
Well, I'm glad that you are enjoying it. I will just say that. I'm glad that you overall enjoyed it, because I know when you talked about it like two or three episodes ago, like it seemed like you were digging it, but I'm glad to hear that when you finished out Volume 2, it was an enjoyable experience for you to talk about it so positively on this episode.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it's gotten me down this like rabbit hole of Disney manga. Like very briefly, I'll just tell you, I read this other one called Miriya and Marie. And it's like the girl cat Marie from the Aristocats, from Disney's The Aristocats, is randomly like a witch teacher. she like, so our plot begins with like meeting this like really absurdly rich girl child in Japan. And she's sad because it's her birthday and her parents aren't there. And all of a sudden, Marie poofs in and she's like, I'm going to take you to 1910 Paris and teach you how to be a witch. And you're like, okay.
Sure.
This book is like...
That feels right, yeah.
It's like every shoujo manga trope you can possibly think of is in this book. There's like the bad boy rival who there's romantic tension with. There's lots of magical talking cats. There's whole sequences where there's like makeover montages, and part of the magic is like learning how to do your nails really well. It's so pink. And they're like, they go on quests to like, there's like this bowl of fruit at one point, and the fruit is all talking about how ugly it is. So Miriya has to like use her magic to make the fruit feel beautiful again. It's so stupid, and I love every page of it.
That's fantastic. Oh my gosh. Well, now I got to look into this, because I don't even know. Like, is this why we went down the weird hole that we went down a couple of weeks ago, looking into Disney merch? Because that was a whole thing that we did. Okay.
You know what I'm going to do? Well, Kate's going to tell us about her deal, and while she's doing that, I'm gonna drop some pictures from this manga into our live chat for our listeners who are tuning in with us right now.
Please, Kate, how are you? How have comic books been? All that stuff.
So once upon a time, I had a MacBook Pro laptop, and in a pandemic, that stupid butterfly keyboard broke. Ooh. And so I waited over 2 months to have my appointment come up to get it fixed and get the parts in, because everything, supply chain's messed up. So I just got it back. Super exciting. All fixed and beautiful. Finally. Don't have to use a Bluetooth keyboard anymore. And then it's been like 3 days, and I sat down at my desk this morning to start prepping for the pod and wasn't thinking about it. Had a can of Diet Dr. Pepper in my hand, which I would never ever set on my desk next to my computer, but wasn't thinking and was tired and set it down. And then I went to adjust something else on my desk and I knocked it over all over my freaking brand new keyboard.
Oh no.
So that's how I am. I'm like very nervous about how these keys are going to be when it dries. I tried to clean it up, but it was like a not minor spill. So we'll see.
Fingers crossed. I will say I actually did that recently. I like set a can of soda down next to my keyboard, pulled on another cable on accident, like attached to my headphones, and it knocked over the thing all over my keyboard. Keyboards nowadays, I think, are a little bit more resilient. So
not butterfly
crossed.
Keyboards, not these bullshit butterfly mat keyboards. I love them. The like hand feel and typing on it is so much better for me than a normal keyboard with my like hand stuff. Swear by them, but also they are so fragile. I had 2 keys break, Mike, and they replaced the entire top of the trackpad, the battery, the entire keyboard, all was like one piece that had to be replaced, including the touch bar thing at the top.
Oh my!
Like it's just insane.
It's like one piece of machinery. They can't just pull out one thing.
They can't just you fucked up 2 keys. Well, you're like, thank God this is still under Apple Care. So,
jeez, oh Pete. Well, I guess fingers crossed then. Holy smoke.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'd still get it fixed under my like. I paid for the better, longer insurance when I got this, and so it'd still be covered. I mean, I might have to lie about what happened to it because I think liquid spills are like one of those exceptions, but still. They don't listen to this pod. So anyway, that's where I'm at, like, spiritually and emotionally. In terms of comics, I got Comics for a Strange World, a book of poorly drawn lines, which is the second collected volume of the Poorly Drawn Lines webcomic.
Oh, nice.
For Christmas. And I actually got 2 copies of it. Instead of 2 and 3. So I guess I need to read it a second time now. I'm just going to hold on to it because it's a webcomic like collection. It's not like a graphic novel. Like they're just comic strips. And so you don't need to read the first one first. So I think I'm going to hold on to it and regift it like as a thing in my back pocket for future.
Kate's just spilling like all of her deep dark secrets today. She's like, I'm gonna fraud Apple Care. I'm gonna re-gift a thing that I got. What's the third thing that you're going?
Is completely okay. I stand firmly by this. So in any case, I have 2 copies of this. I read one of them. This is Reza Farazmand, is the author and artist. He also did Trashbird on Webtoons, who makes an appearance in this comic sometimes. But it's like this witty parody series of modern issues that's very absurdist humor with these animal characters and human characters. And like, I love it so much. If there was like, I needed a single example of my exact type of humor or sense of humor, some of these comics would be it. This collected volume is not quite as consistently flawless as number 1. So I'm guessing, and this is just a pure guess, that it was done in less time. Like instead of picking out the best of years of the webcomic, maybe they did this over a year. Like it just seems like more of a day-to-day collection versus like, here are the best of the best, the way the first one did.
Gotcha.
But it still made me laugh out loud when I was having a very bad week. And there are some fantastic strips in it. So very worth the money. Now, here's the thing, Michael.
Yes.
You work at Kindle.
Well, yes. I mean, technically, sure.
Technically. So technically, this is your fault. The Kindle version, if someone wanted to pick this up, is $16. Right. And the paperback from Amazon, option next to it, is $12 because nothing makes sense anymore, but you should still buy it. So you should get yourself a paperback. It's cheaper.
I mean, I will say that I have no idea how pricing works at all.
Oh, I actually do know the answer to this riddle. It's just funny to me still. The reason is because there are regulations on how they can discount or not discount ebooks. like in general for digital copies of stuff.
Okay.
And so Amazon is allowed to do deeper discounts on the paperback copies of some stuff. This happens in books too, which is, I heard about this actually on a book industry podcast, not a comics thing, but it's the same problem where for certain things, they're not allowed to drop prices lower than a certain amount for the digital, but they can for the physical because they're regulated differently.
Interesting.
And that was set up because of some lawsuit with publishers and platforms like Amazon and stuff like that, that
right.
just results in stupid stuff because they're allowed to make it a loss leader item. So the paperback is like $5 off or whatever. I think if you went to your comic book shop, this is a $16 or $17 paperback.
Gotcha.
Which you should, if it has curbside, or you can go in safely like Kara did. 100%. I'm so worried that our local shop isn't going to be there after this. But anywho, so I need to pick up number 3, obviously now, and I want to finish that. But I found out while reading this that this author artist, his first actual OGN came out last November, and I need it. I need it so badly because I've only ever read these like cartoon strips from him, from Poorly Drawn Lines, which is the website you can go to for this strip, but then also on Webtoons. And Webtoons might actually have Poorly Drawn Lines now. I haven't checked in a while, but Webtoons had Trash Bird on there for forever. It was like my go-to first read when I was checking what had new updates, although I think Trash Bird has since ended. But I need this OGN so badly. So stay tuned for future reads.
Yeah, I'm looking at a preview of the OGN, and it looks, I might be able to get into this. Like, I don't think that the web strip was actually a thing. That I don't remember being that into it, but I think I like this guy's sense of humor, this creator's sense of humor. So I definitely might check out this OGN just to see what it's all about.
It'll be very interesting to see how this person does with, like, how he does with writing an actual story, since the strips are very like short. Even sometimes there's like a sequence of them, like 3 days in a row, that tell more of an extended story, but it's kind of like a joke with the punchline, not a true like narrative arc kind of thing.
Right.
So it'll be really interesting to see how they do. And I really, really like this style of artwork. It reminds me a lot of, who's the person that does the drawings of herself? Is it like Sarah Scribbles or something like that?
Oh yeah, Sarah Scribbles. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that, where it's like somehow with just a tiny change in the line, they make the face so much funnier. It evokes so much more, even though the art is so like clean and sparse. It's just very good.
Yeah, this art style reminds me of a much more serious book that I read like a year or so ago called Sabrina. It won like a bunch of awards and stuff. It won like a prose novel award, even though it was a graphic novel. It's a very serious book, not funny at all, not funny in the slightest, but it was a very good book. And the art is in the same kind of simplistic style that somehow can convey a lot of emotion without actually being like truly like full fleshed out realistic, artwork, which I think is a very specific talent that is only grasped by a handful of creators. Yeah.
Exactly. Like if you can do that much with that little, boy, that is incredible.
Exactly.
How about you, Mike? What did you read this week?
Yeah, this week's been all over the place. I've been I just started a new D&D game, so I have been devoting a lot of energy to that. And then we sat down and played, and I realized that I haven't devoted enough time and energy to it. So, so I've been doing like a lot of extra homework for myself just to make sure that I'm like ready to go for that game. But other than that, I did sit down and read a couple books. I read Zach Thompson and Jen Hickman's Lonely Receiver. This is from Aftershock Comics. This book was really something else. I saw Zach Thompson was talking about it on Twitter because the last issue had just come out and the first issue of I Breathe the Body had just come out. And so I picked up that book and I was like, let's grab this 5-issue miniseries. Let's see what it's all about. And it is definitely something else. It's extremely, I don't want to say graphic, but it's an extremely abstract, strange book that follows a character who like swings rapidly between depression and mania, and you can see the swings uplifting between the characters like emotions when the pages are colored really bright. They're in like a sense of mania. If they're colored kind of dark, they're in like this depressive state. And then you get these mixes between both as they're transitioning, and it all kind of stems around this idea of our main character gets this smartphone thing that is a slight biological living device that can create your perfect mate for you. But that perfect mate is just a computer. Kind of reminds me of the Her movie that came out with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. But it dives deeper beyond just the idea of, you know, being in love with an artificial intelligence. It goes into like the psychosexual nature of what is love and what is like actual romantic connection between two people. Where does the physiological and mental like boundary lie between those things? Is it all physical? Is it all mental? How do we explore that in an abstract space? And it's all done in this 5-issue miniseries. I don't know if I completely understood the book. Like, I think this is something that I probably would want to go back and reread. But I honestly couldn't stop reading it. Like, for every time I felt confused, there were 4 or 5 more times where I felt compelled to keep reading, because the pacing and the way that Jen Hickman's art is drawn, it really sucks you in. It leaves you scratching your head constantly. But at the end, I was like, I think I get it, but I definitely want to read it again to make sure I truly understand it. Hickman's art is to die for. Like, if you read the book that she did with Chris Sabella over at Vault Comics called Test, you'll definitely dig this one. I think that she really got to stretch her muscles in terms of trying some really abstract, weird shit. I think Zach Thompson has this fascination with the cross between technology, like human biohacking, and actual technology. You can see it in his other book that he did called Come Into Me, where there are these weird mind things going on. It's a game that you kind of play with yourself as you can put yourself literally in the body of another person. It's all over the place. So Lonely Receiver, I don't know if I could recommend this to people, but I think that everybody should read it. You know, like that's the way that I kind of see this book. I definitely want to go back and reread it. But yeah, that's the one thing. It's one of the things I read. The other thing I want to call out really quick is Kaiju number 8, chapter 24. This is by Matsumoto Noya. I don't really have anything to say about this book other than if you're not reading this, you should really catch up. It's 24 chapters. It's fantastic. This latest chapter, the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because they've been kind of building things on like a slow, steady, exciting pace. Our main character is growing in his abilities of being this kaiju monster, but also trying to rank up in this kaiju hunting group. You got to read the series. It's all over the place.
Do we though?
It's great. It's actually, I don't know, it's really fun. It's probably one of the best like fast-paced action manga I've read in a while without being over the top and like having too many goofs in it. It truly is straightforward in itself. And I think what really blew me away for this is that there's been constant tension building about, are people going to figure out whether he's got these powers or not? And then this latest chapter drops a huge bomb on the entire series, which I'm really impressed by, because I feel like usually you get these kinds of twists either really, really late in the series or really, really early. And I feel like this was well paced enough. And it's a perfect time to kind of make a major change in the book for the better, like to introduce some really interesting action and some potential for some of the side characters to really show themselves, that they've gotten little bits and pieces of growth throughout the previous few issues. So Kaiju number 8, I think this is one of the like most popular manga that's coming out through the Shonen Jump app right now. So if you're a manga reader, you've probably heard of this, maybe you've tried it, but yeah, it's this latest chapter really blew me away. I was really impressed just overall with the way that they're taking the narrative. So I wanted to make sure to shout it out in this episode. Anyways, $2 a month. Everyone should go get Shonen Jump. We're definitely not sponsored by them, but we talk about it every week. Let's actually move on and talk about comic books that are coming out on February 3rd, 2021. What are you both excited for this week? Let's start with you, Kara.
So there's a new comic book out called Luna #1, new series by Miriya Lovett. And I know you're not supposed to judge a book by their cover, but you know, comics half the reason you're reading is for the arts.
Totally fine.
So the colors on this comic book cover really caught my eye. It was like this rainbow explosion of pastels, and reading the solicit for it, it seems like this is a series about like this woman joins a cult, but it turns out there's actually magic and there's lots of like crazy shit going on. And it seems maybe a little more like darker and weirder than stuff that I would normally gravitate to, but sometimes I try new things.
Sometimes.
So that caught my eye. And then there's multiple Star Wars series out this week. I'm not going to steal Kate's thunder, so I chose Star Wars The High Republic Adventures #1.
Ooh.
Yeah. The description of this issue is like, let's put Star Wars words into a blender and make new Star Wars words.
Perfect description.
But then they also name check Yoda, and I haven't read any High Republic stuff yet. So I'm just kind of like, wait, where is the High Republic in the Star Wars timeline? Like, is this the true baby Yoda, like actual Yoda as a baby? So, like, I know he's.
Are we going to get an explanation about? Right. Go ahead.
So I'm just like, what is this timeline? But like, Yoda's in this book, so I guess that's to draw in people who don't give a crap about Star Wars beyond the characters they already know.
Right.
But I think in last week's episode, Brian said something like, I just want to like Star Wars again. And you know what? This book feels like maybe it's for Brian then too. So he can just not have to deal with everything being about Skywalkers all the time, which I get. So those are my picks for this week.
Yeah, Danny in the chat is saying that the Star Wars High Republic is taking place 200 years before Phantom Menace. So what? Yoda definitely could be involved. I mean, there's potential for all sorts of different things.
Wait a minute. So then in High Republic, Yoda's like 700, so he's still probably a Jedi Master by then. Wait a minute. I thought the High Republic was like 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. Am I mixing this up with previous Star Wars canon?
I just sensed a disturbance in the Force that's actually Brian Murray at his house right now, clearing his throat and saying, well...
No, I think you're getting this mixed up with Knights of the Old Republic, which takes place... like 1,000 or so years before the Battle of Yavin. So like it's understandable to be confused because Star Wars, they just don't give a shit. And they're just like, you know what? Forget everything. Nothing matters except for when we make it matter. This isn't a Star Wars podcast. Not yet. So let's stop here and talking about that. I'm going to just jump over to Kate. What's your pick for this week?
My pick is Star Wars The High Republic #2. So actually, in this timeline, it sets, according to the mythology, it says it's centuries before the Skywalker saga. Sorry, Mike.
Multiple centuries. That has to be more than 2 centuries. God.
Yeah. It says centuries before the Skywalker saga. Jedi at their height, protecting the galaxy as Republic pioneers push out into new territories. So this High Republic series...
This is relevant to what you're saying, I promise. So you're telling me that 200 years before Emperor Palpatine takes over, the Star Wars, like the Jedi are at their peak, and just now they're expanding the galaxy, presumably into what we know as the Outer Rim, and within 200 years, all of that just crumbles? Like,
Did
I understand
that witness and live through the last 4 years in America? Come on, Kara.
200 years. Okay, so 200 years back from us, that's like the early 1800s, right? So we're thinking Industrial Revolution. People have empire waist dresses. Like, we've had monumental change, but we haven't explored whole new swaths of the galaxy and have a whole religious order crumble to the ground. Like, well, anyway.
I mean, I think in the defense of the Star Wars, like they also have a ton of extra technology that we don't have access to, right? Because in the world of Star Wars, like the technology really doesn't change no matter how long you go. Because even if you go back to stuff like Knights of the Old Republic, they're still using phasers and they're still using warp speed. So technology hasn't advanced, which means that either we've hit a peak of technology and we're just kind of riding that peak, or there's just no one trying to advance it. But nonetheless, that allows them to travel to far distant lands and do all this different stuff, like colonize different planets and things. So that's my justification.
All I'm saying is I expected from all of what my nebulous understanding of the High Republic is that it took place in the distant past. 200 years is not the distant past. 200 years is we have steam locomotives. It's only a few generations back. It's not ancient history. Ugh.
Yeah. I guess this is a Star Wars podcast now.
So in the High Republic, as opposed to the High Republic Adventures, this one is out on the frontier following what a character I assume they intended to name Kevin Tennis, and then they're like, that's not Star Wars enough. How about Keeve Trennis? And they're like, R makes it Star Wars.
Yes.
So this is a Padawan who's facing the ultimate choice. Will she complete her Jedi trials or rescue innocents from disaster? New Jedi! ! New ships! ! New evils to fight! ! So obviously we're hyped.
New toys.
No,
exactly.
No, it takes place in the past. It is old Jedi. It is old ships. It is old adventures. I hate everything about this. Oh my god.
Actually, Kara, all of Star Wars is in the past in a galaxy far, far away, long ago.
All right. Okay, let's calm down here. So, Kate, you're excited about this?
What I'm intending to tell you is that I am not buying this. I am definitely trade waiting because this is a mini series. It's a 6-issue mini that I have not read the first one of. So, grain of salt on this as a thing I'm hyped about. But it looks cool. I definitely am going to read the mini, like the trade when it comes out. I just have no interest in reading it month to month when I know that this will be like a fast-paced, like just Star Wars run around fighting stuff, saving people. So catch me in like 4 months when this trade comes out.
All right. Well, for me, really quick, because I realized we're recording so long today. Before I get into my comic pick, like I've said for the last couple weeks, it's 2021. We're doing something wild. If you want to get a $20 gift card to your local comic shop, Comixology or Midtown Comics, all you got to do is share the show publicly on Instagram, Twitter, or social media in some capacity. Make sure to tag us so that we know, and you could win $20. So if you haven't already done that, you should definitely do it. We're allowing people to do it once a year, but just keep sharing the show. It really actually definitely helps us. For my pick this week,
with $20, you could buy Star Wars: The High Republic, Star Wars: High Republic Adventures, and have leftovers to get Mike's pick.
My pick, which is that's what I should have written. But my pick this week is Fear Case #1. This is by Matt Kindt, Tyler Jenkins, and Hillary Jenkins. I don't know what this is. The cover makes it look like it's going to be horror, detective, mystery garbage that like these trio do really well. I mean, Matt Kindt, Tyler Jenkins, and Hillary Jenkins working together is a perfect creative team as far as I'm concerned. If you're looking for other series that they did together, I think they worked on. Oh man, now I'm losing the name of it. It's Grass Kings Volume 1 or Grass Kings the series. I think it was a 2-volume series. It's beautiful. Everybody should go read that as well. I'm excited to see whatever this is. I don't know what it is. I'm just excited. So give it to me. I've got that pre-ordered, ready to come to my.
Yeah, Tyler Jenkins is one of those artists where it's like, oh, he's on it. Okay, I'll pick this up.
Exactly.
It's that good.
Exactly. Well, we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to be answering the question, what are your weird comic habits? And we have got quite a bit of notes for that. So we'll be back in just a second. For our show this week, we are talking about, well, the weird comic habits that we have. Like, what is it that you do when you're sitting down? Do you have a comic book ritual? Do you, like, digest certain books a certain way? Do you have to be in the right mood to pick up some types of comics? How do you read digital issues? How do you read single floppies? How do you read OGNs? Do you sit down with the correct cup of tea or something? Like, what makes like your entire comic book reading experience very unique and very you? I've got a bunch of questions that I kind of posed to Kara and Kate here. I guess to get started, I mean, I will say that my comic book reading ritual, for the most part, like when I sit down to do things, is I grab my iPad nowadays and I just plop down on the couch. I've got like a soda or a water ready, and I sit, like, prop up my legs and I just get going. and I'm reading single issues. And if it's reading single issues versus manga or something, like if I'm reading comic books, I usually hop around. I don't usually do binge reading unless I'm doing binge reading. Then I'm like only reading that one series. I'm not reading anything else that day. That's kind of like the beginning of this thing. But I guess Kara, Kate, what are your habits, at least just to like sit down and get ready to read comics?
I think I had a different assumption of what this prompt was going to be because when I read what are your weird comic habits, I just got mad at myself and everybody else because I was like, why the fuck are we reading comics at all? This is so stupid. And I want to explain myself because this is a very pro comic book podcast. Like, we love comic books. We have made it very clear multiple times that we love comics and we read them all the time, and we have they're close parts of our identity. That said, why the fuck do we read comic books, guys? It makes no sense as a consumer or as a creator. And I know the answer
two words for you.
Yeah.
Dopamine, serotonin.
Boom. Okay. So I got mad about this as like weird comic book habits, and I'm like, okay. So you've decided to read a comic book, and you're gonna you either have to go to a bookstore or library and hope they have a trade or an OGN that you are able to find and looks interesting to you. And then you will see the price and you will think, $20? I don't know about that, but like maybe you'll buy it. Or if you are located near a comic book store where you like don't have to actively seek one out, and it looks like a store that feels like it could be welcoming to you, and you go into that store and you are confronted by the array of comic books, and you pick up a floppy and you look at the cover price of $4 and you're like, what the hell is this? You might not buy that book. And if you do, you have now spent $4 on an experience that lasts 10 minutes, maybe 15. And if it's a superhero comic, odds are you have no idea what's going on anyways, because you need to know the last 10 years of canon in order to understand something. Why do we do this to ourselves?
I mean, I don't think that this is unique to comics, though, right? Because I think if you pick up, or if you go back to when, prose books were serialized in like chapters, and, you would pick them up like at the local newsstand or something like that. It's the same kind of thing. Like, you're not going to pick up chapter 15 of Oliver Twist or something like that. You're going to go back and you're either going to try to find them, or you're going to trade wait until they're all collected into one edition, right?
Wait, Oliver Twist.
I mean, you're right. Right? So like, I don't think this is a new concept. I think the if we take a step back and try to like focus in on what you were talking about in regards to like superhero books and stuff like that, I think that's a problem just with the overall publishing industry when it comes to big two comics, where they want you to be hooked into something. They want you to be addicted to a comic. They want you to be part of this quote unquote secret little club that knows all about the X-Men, or knows about the Avengers, or knows about the Trinity, or knows about Superman, or just Wonder Woman, or just Batman. Because that's like the mentality of comic book creators. Like, someone at some point decided, let's make things all a part of a continuity. And because of that, those readers then became the creators, and then became the creators again, and it's only like self-perpetuated itself, which is why we as comic book readers really respect when someone can take a comic book character that's been established and create a standalone series that anyone can pick up. So you end up with things like The Dark Knight, you end up with things like The Vision, you end up with things like Mr. Miracle, that just anybody could potentially pick up because it's so much more digestible and understandable, even if you don't have all that continuity plugged in. So I don't know. I realize this is way off the topic, but I just want to focus on that bit.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. I was just thinking about like how the whole experience of how specialized comic books are and how you get into them. Like, I guess you could argue that like books or music are similar in certain ways, but at least like music, you could like flip on the radio, or books you can like see. I don't know. They just feel like you're more likely to pick up a book and have it be one and done, as opposed to like part of a series as part of a universe.
Sure, but
I don't know. Like, this just made me think about how weird the whole process of like finding comic books is. Like, it takes a lot of effort on the part of the consumer, just made me think of the flip side of all the effort that goes in on the creation side, and how the majority of the creators do not make a livable wage off of creating comic books. And then that made me mad. And then I just got mad at the whole system. But
what I'm hearing is that Mike sent Kara into a spiral and has a lot of making up to do.
I have a lot of feelings.
Hey, listen, I thought that I was pretty clear about what are your weird comic habits was being about you, the person, but I guess it could be applied to the whole comics industry.
My weird comic habits are continuing to read and buy comics, even though the whole thing is like designed to make it hard for people to get into comics, which I guess is why this podcast exists on some level, because we're like, hey, let's curate a selection for interested listeners. But like, you know, I don't know, is just a random person going to tune in, or is this podcast only for people who are already reading comics? Okay, now I realize I'm getting off topic.
No. See, but this is the thing that I constantly struggle with is I don't know how new and listener friendly this show is, and I don't think that it is at all. Because I think that we as and again, I'm going completely off topic on this just because it needs to be said. Like, I think we pride ourselves on this show of being people that can curate really good lists and recommendations for people, whether you're really into comic books or you're not. But at the same time, 90% of what our show offers is what I think a lot of diehard comic book fans want, which is like discussion about books that they probably haven't heard of because they've already heard of a bunch of other books and they wouldn't know where to find these other things, or they just want confirmation that we're reading some of the other stuff that they've considered good and we also consider good. And so if you come into this show and you don't know anything about comic books, you don't know much about comics, you're just trying to find some new books to read, I don't know if we offered that experience that people are looking forward to, because when you get into the second half or the first half of our show, we start saying, what are your comic picks for this week? And if you don't know much about like how the comic industry works, what does it even matter what your comic book picks are, right? I say like, hey, comic books come out on this day, but like, what does that even mean if you don't even know where to get comic books in the first place? So like, we're already, we've already set up a couple of barriers for people. And I don't know if we've gotten any negative feedback about that, but I do think about that a lot. Like if I were to introduce this, to hand this, an episode of our show over to someone that has never isn't really into comic books. Like I know people of friends of mine that they like reading comic books, but they aren't following comic books week to week. And I think if I gave them an episode and said, okay, what didn't make sense to you? What wasn't clear to you? That we maybe took for granted. I think that they'd have a whole long list of things, because a lot of our show is kind of predicated on the idea that you understand a couple different things about the comic book industry before you even go into it. So yeah, thank you for this therapy session.
I have two things to say. One, thank you for joining me in my crisis. Mm-hmm. Two, it's kind of like Kate said earlier, it's all about that dopamine and serotonin. Like I feel like if I step outside myself and look at my love of comic books, I'm like, why are you doing this? Why does anyone do this? But when I'm actually reading them, like I like the stories, I like the linear graphic storytelling, I like the characters in the case of superhero comics that I choose to read. So I guess what I'm really saying is, I'm sorry for dragging you into my crisis, but what is normal versus weird anyways? Aren't we all weird in our own ways?
Okay, so my comic reading ritual. Going back on the tracks.
Sure, go for it.
I did assume you meant personally. But in general, my comic reading ritual is to not read any comics at all for months, and then binge them, like devour everything, like pick up boxes at the curbside, for like about 3 weeks, as if someone's about to break into my apartment, steal them all and set them on fire. So just voraciously. And then I don't read them again for a few months. So that's a ritual I adopted in grad school. And does it bring me joy? Mostly no. But it does in those periods where I'm reading way too many than I should be, because I'm avoiding other tasks. So yeah.
Well, I mean, there. I guess when I said weird, I mostly was thinking, what are your unique comic habits, because again, there's no necessarily weird. I think, Carrie, you're right. Like, we're all weird in our own way, which makes us all normal. And I also saw that scene in Incredibles when the kid says, if everyone's special, then no one's special. So I guess that makes sense, right? At the same time, like, I'm sure that my habits for reading comic books are a bit different than everyone else, right? Like, I sit down and I, like I said, I sit down with a soda, I sit down, I prop my legs up, like I binge, 20 or 30 books at a time, but I can only ever read like 20 chapters of a manga at a time, or 8 or 10 single issues at a time, before my brain just goes, okay, I've put enough fiction into my mind today, I can't do anymore. I feel like that number has significantly decreased over the years. Like, I used to just sit and be able to read comics all day. Like, there were times that I would grab a stack of trade paperbacks and single issues, and I'd put them on a table and lay them all out, and then just read through every single thing that I set myself up for. And nowadays, I'll be lucky if I could get through like a third of that same size stack, of like 10 or 12 collected editions and single issues and stuff. So
because of time limits, or because you just don't enjoy doing that anymore?
I honestly think that a part of it is that there is a level of distraction that I allow myself to have that really pulls me out of reading. And this happens at work too, where I'm like, there'll be days where I can't stop looking at my phone because I'm getting notifications, or I just am not involved mentally in the thing that I'm doing. And there are just off days when I'm sitting down to actually read comics, and there are like golden moments where there will be days where I decide in advance I'm going to turn my phone off, or I'm going to turn it on silent mode, put it somewhere else so I can't reach it, and then just read comic books for like 4 hours straight or 5 hours straight or something, right? And then you can get a lot done. But a lot of the times, especially now during the pandemic times, when you're constantly on your phone, constantly on a computer, or at least for me, my attention span is so much easier to just be distracted. So like, anytime my phone buzzes, it'll open something up, and then I'll go, oh, well, let's check out Twitter, or let's check out what somebody sent me on Telegram, or, let's go to Instagram and let's just see what's going on. Like, the world continues to move whether or not I'm looking at my phone, and yet I feel like I need to pay attention all the time. So like, my problem is that if I get a notification from someone that they want me to read, or look at a TikTok, or they want to ask me a question about something, it'll put me on like a 30 or 45-minute tangent of doing that thing beyond what the person originally messaged me for. And then I'll go, oh shit, I was in the middle of reading comics. Next thing I know, it's midnight, and I can't, I'm done for the night. I can't really read. I don't want to read any more comics. And, it's kind of a bummer, but I think it's just a combination of, not having that, I don't know, for me, it's not having that daily commute and stuff that kind of focuses my brain on things, and allows me to get outside of just the same spot that I'm in all the time. Because since I'm in this tiny little apartment, I'm used to doing all of those things all in the same place, whether it's reading comics, checking my phone, doing whatever, always at either my desk or at the couch or in bed. And so like, I only have so many places I could sit in my little 600 square foot apartment. And so there's no like dedicated, this is my reading chair, and this is my
4 spots in my apartment to sit.
Exactly. So I think
not in New York, so mine's 700 square feet. Absolutely spacious.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I'm revealing a lot about myself here, but I think that like, I don't know if other people are feeling this thing, but from the sentiment I gather just over the internet in general, I feel like a lot of people are also having these issues, Yeah,
so I will say that a few years ago, Xander told me about how he always has his phone on do not disturb mode to avoid getting alerts, and then he sees them when he picks up his phone, if he's picking it up anyway, and that he picks it up so often that it really doesn't matter. And I tried it and have never gone back. That I set my phone to do not disturb, and then in the settings I changed it so all calls go through, and everyone close to me knows that I do this, and that if they actually need me and it's time sensitive, they can call. And so I don't have to worry that like I'm missing something, because I know that they can call. But then also, nobody freaking calls except like elderly relatives. Like, no one ever wants to call. So when I pick up the phone, I pick it up. I will say that my threshold for the number of single issues I can read in a row has gone down substantially from like 2012 into the late teens of the 2000s. Like, I did the same thing you're talking about, where I'd just sit down. I would walk over across the street to a Speedway, get just disgusting amounts of snack trash food, like bags of chips and candy and one of those enormous slushies for $1 in the summer, and come back with like 800 grams of sugar, a bunch of caffeine, and simple carbs. And then I just sit there with a stack all afternoon and night, and it was amazing, and it was the best time. And then I cannot do that now. I do prefer to read OGNs in one sitting if I can. Like, I will purposely like not pick it up until I have time to do that. Just more because I realize that if it's good, I'm not going to want to stop, and then I'll stay up past my bedtime, and I'm old, so I got to go to bed.
Same.
But for issues, I really tend to start losing concentration after like 4 issues. And so I often will kind of, you know how there's often like that kind of halfway in a arc in comics. That's where I'll stop in one day of reading. And that's so weird, but I think it's the same kind of thing where I have so many other things and so much other like anxiety of like stuff I need to be doing and things I should be paying attention to and things that people I want to talk to. That I just can't just sit there and be in my own little world, which is a bummer. But also right now I try not to beat myself up too much for spending a lot more time talking on Telegram and Discord and stuff like that, because social interaction when you live alone in a pandemic is pretty valuable.
Right.
So, yeah. But in terms of like when I sit down to read it, other than timing, it very much depends on format. Do you only read on your tablet?
Nowadays, I'm completely digital for all of my single issues and most collections and stuff. The only stuff that I'm reading physically there's a couple manga series that I collect and OGNs and stuff that I pick up. Okay. Yeah. So like the sitting down, propping feet up with some snacks and a beverage is 100% how I do digital. Yeah.
And one of my aspirations in life is to get one of those waterproof tablets so that I can do tub comics, because tub comics are where it's at.
Yeah. I love it.
But so far I just have snacks comics for my digital. But then, and I do like, usually that's with Hoopla, but I do have a lot of like Humble Bundle trades and some like Comixology sale stuff, but I've never actually subscribed to stuff on Comixology.
Gotcha.
So for like trades and stuff, I'm like a little neurotic about it. Like I don't want dirty fingers when I'm touching my trades, and or feel bad with the library books for the same reason. But then we'll still like sit down and get cozy, but we're like sitting up under a very specific light that's the best light, and with like recently washed and dried hands if we're touching a floppy. Is it worth only a penny, if that? Yes. Is it something that I even am going to want to read again and has no sentimental value? Absolutely. But I'm still going to be neurotic with this floppy for reasons that completely evade me. I could have gotten it free on Free Comic Book Day, and I'll still be like, well, time to get in my extra like careful comics reading mode.
Yeah. I mean, I know why we have that. It's because we've become friends with Nick White.
There you go.
Nick, I love you to death, but you've built these neuroses into my mind that I should preserve all of my comics as if they were going into a museum archive.
I am feeling seen by a lot of this. When I was getting stacks of floppies, I would kind of do something similar to what Kate was doing, where it's like you're not reading them every week. You go and get a haul like once every few months, and then you just read everything. Mm-hmm. So when I had a functioning pull list, I was getting like maybe 10 books a month, maybe 12, and then not going to pick them up for like months at a time. But like I always went. So, and I'd been going to my LCS long enough where they knew that I was good for them. I was just going to come eventually.
That was how I always had a pull too.
Yeah. So then, and then I would like read everything in one sitting. And then floppies, I feel like at some point I must have been in a chair, but a lot of this was during like high school and college when like just like kind of being splayed out on the floor or on your bed was the way to go. So now I'm in my early 30s, and my body doesn't like that anymore. So I feel like the things that I did with that are no longer the way to go. When I'm reading comics on on Hoopla, I'm usually reading them. I've got like a laptop with like a tablet mode, so I do that. But my laptop is too big for me to like have it comfortably on my lap, like maybe you would with an iPad. So I have to be like sitting up in bed with my legs in a weird place so I could like lean over and look at my laptop. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I can't stand reading comics on my computer screen. Maybe it's just because I'm blind as a bat, but I need it closer than my laptop comfortably is to my face.
Gotcha. And you can do that. I mean, that's what is nice about a tablet. But sorry, go ahead, Kara.
No, it's okay. So a few years ago, I got into the here we go. Now I'm going to fit into the prompt that you originally wanted, Mike. Here's my weird / unique comic book habit. I got into the habit of deciding that if I liked a series that I knew that I liked from either like reading the floppies or getting it out from the library or whatever, then I would invest in like the deluxe hardcover edition. So I have a shelf on my bookcase that is all just like, I've got New Frontier Absolute Edition. I've got like the giant library edition of Monstrous volumes like 1 through 3. I've got Hellboy library editions 1 and 2. It's like these oversized hardcover, like foil embossed cover situations, and I never fucking read them because I have to be sitting on my bed with these enormous oversized books open on my bed. With, like,
you need like a church
with that.
You need like a church style lectern to read a book like that, right?
Yeah, but then also what Kate was saying about your hands can't be greasy. These are beautiful glossy pages. Yeah. I don't want to smush them.
Right. So we all understand the sanctity of comic books is what I'm hearing, is that the physical paper, while valueless and has no real long-term profitability, still must be kept in the highest quality. I think we all understand.
Well, this is why I like manga, because manga as a reading experience is perfect. The book can fit in your hand. They're all paperbacks, and they don't normally have color, and the pages are matte, so you're not like freaking out about getting your little finger oils on the shiny page.
Agreed. That is one thing that I really do like about manga, is that it feels the right size for reading. It's as if someone in Japan actually paid attention to human beings and said, what if we decided to create something that was comfortable, easy to carry, and easy to read?
Such a strange size for reading in your hand. Like, it is very odd. And whoever came up with these new trade size for paperbacks in the US that are like skinny and tall, what the hell is this?
Well, the thing, it's funny because I think that's like, it's a lot of that is publishers trying to say, like, look at how nice this art is. We want to give you the maximum art possible. And I totally understand that. It's just not easy to hold on to. Like, it's one thing, like, I think it's great on digital. I like the size on digital because a lot of tablets and stuff are set up to be like that. But, I remember the thing that was really interesting about the series Runaways when it first came out is that they released the whole series in digest format. So it was the size of a manga volume, but it was in full color. I wish
that's how I read it.
I wish that we would go back to that. I'd like to see a series get published like that. That's not just a quote unquote children's book. I don't think Runaways is a children's book by any means, but it was published and marketed that way.
No, I know what you mean. Like most of the Archie comics, I think that they do high volume sales with are the digest or double digest format, where it's like, okay, the pages are full color, but it's like that cheaper matte printing material. So I've got multiple boxes of those still because I'm just like, but this reading experience is perfect.
Right.
It is. I will say the Runaways, I didn't like. I think that series would have been better with a different paper because the matte doesn't do justice to the color work.
Oh, for sure. I definitely agree with that. And I think, like, when you look at manga books that do feature color, they do have like a handful of glossy pages, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like
And then there's books like Miriya and Miriya, which is all color. Right. And glossy pages.
I don't know. It's interesting because I think, but like, then why don't we just get rid of the matte paper and bring it down to glossy, and then but also print it at a smaller size? That's a whole other thing. The problem is that I think comic books, and even when we think back to what I was talking about before, the serialized, prose publishing, you know, it was all meant to be just like throwaway. It was supposed to be pulp.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a dime valued fiction that doesn't really have a lot of value. But somewhere at some point, someone said, well, what if this was worth value? And then people said, oh shit, wait, hold on a second. It could be worth something if we realize that there's an inherent scarcity to things that were originally supposed to be thrown away. If any of those things that were thrown away survived, they would have value. So hold on to your Beanie Babies, kids, because these things are going to have value in 50 years. Like Action Comics #1 being this whole thing, or, you know, Amazing Fantasy number 16 or 12 or whatever it is being this whole thing. Like, it's all scarce. It's all just based on like bullshit scarcity. Capitalism sucks. Let's just burn this whole place down. I'm done. I'm just done.
Like, do not get me started on collectible comics.
Yeah. So I know that's totally far away from the point at hand here. I just like it does come back to, like, you know, why do we hold on, you know, if we're talking about why do we preserve these comics, for some reason it's been ingrained in our brain. And I know I pointed at Nick earlier, but as comic book readers, and I think as we talk to people that work at comic book shops or people that participate in the comics community, there is this inherent like holiness that we hold on to for these books. This is why, like, I feel like I talk to people that go to like zine conventions and stuff, and they get all hoity-toity about saying, well, I've got this limited 100 print zine that came from this semi-famous author, and like they only made so many and they're never going to print it again. And it's like, does that have value? Does it have monetary value to you? Is it all about like a personal value to you? Why are you bragging to me about this thing that I'm never going to be able to read and you're not going to let me borrow? Like, it's a whole thing.
You ready for me to make some of our listeners cringe right now?
Please.
Probably including Nick. Okay, so one of the perks of the job I had at a comic book shop when I was in college was, so like the job that I was doing is I was basically tasked with sorting through all of the miscellaneous boxes in the basement. Like there were just long boxes to the ceiling of books that the owner never had time to go through. So it was my job to organize them and like sort them so that like stuff could actually be found. And this experience was fundamental to my understanding of American comics, because once you've got like 40 years range across multiple publishers of what's going on in the comic industry, like that's how I got familiarity with like McFarlane's Spider-Man covers and how many freaking versions of Death of Superman there were available. And like, you know, so just that experience going through everything. But the big perk of the job, besides the knowledge that I gained, the friends that I made on the way, it was the fact that I basically got first dibs on anything that I found. I could just like go to the owner and be like, can I like have this / buy it? So here's my weird comic book thing, which I was thinking about the other day because I went through like a Red Sonja reading binge with like the newer stuff with like Gail Simone and some of the newer Dynamite stuff. I have like I think a complete or almost complete run of the original Marvel comics of Red Sonja, and I have not read them yet. I've had them for 10 years. They are not bagged and boarded. They are in a short box just mashed together. I don't know what condition they're in.
Oh no, Kara.
They're probably bent. At some point I'll read them, but like I refuse to let go of them. I refuse to bag and board them because they've been sitting in a basement for a decade already. There's no value to them.
Right.
But I'm just kind of like, I recognize that's a weird thing that I had done and continue to do. Just like my hoarding of this series where I'm like, I think I'll like this. I certainly like the idea of having this. There's a good story attached to it. It's just all these books are mashed in a box and I have no idea what their condition is. It's fine. It's fine.
Before I knew who Mike Rappin was, there was a post on Facebook of this guy with this spreadsheet of comics he was trying to sell before he moved to New York.
Yeah.
And one of those things was like the entire run of that Batwoman series that with Kate Kane. Yep. And that's the first time I met Mike.
Oh, yeah.
I bought Batwoman off him for $30.
Yeah, I think of all those comics, I think I was trying to sell like 1,800 comics before I moved to New York.
Yeah.
And I think I sold like maybe 100, and I think I made like maybe like $200 off at maximum.
Yeah, then the rest of them, that's how I met you and Brian the second time, was you donated them to Comic Book Club. So
yeah, everything that I couldn't sell I ended up donating to my old college comic book club.
Then they lived in my apartment because paperwork wasn't filed correctly for storage on campus before I took office. Anyway, that's how I met Mike, was buying comics that have no value except that I love them, and they're bagged and boarded and loved and kept in a short box in a climate controlled area, and they have no value except sentimental.
Exactly.
So I noticed one of the questions had the magic word Goodreads in it. Do you want to go into that maybe? Because I have thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. So I think that like Danny in the chat just said, I'm sure some of those Batwoman issues are key issues. That whole run is a key run. I'll just say that. Yep. And I'm kicking myself every day for handing it over to Kate. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, the two other things that I did want to talk about that I had on my list here before we wrap up is, do you take screenshots or photos of the comics you're reading? And this is kind of just a yes or no thing, because I like having references to weird, funny panels. But I don't know if either of you guys do that.
Only if it's stupid or I'm doing a read through. Like I definitely took photos most prolifically when I tasked myself with reading Age of Apocalypse, and I was like, everyone is coming on this journey with me whether they want to or not. But in general,
that's exactly the same. If I put in the art document only if they're ridiculous, and then I'm going to share them on Telegram.
Yes.
So
I like having, different records of like either goofy panels from comics that I really, really love, like X-Men or Dragon Ball or My Hero Academia. Or when I was reading One Piece, you guys have no idea the number of screenshots of just random One Piece things that I have in my camera roll, because I read that all digitally, so it was perfect. But yeah, I just wanted to ask because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't completely weird, because I always wondered, on social media, people just have like perfect panels from different comics and stuff. And now I understand it. When you binge read or when you get really into something, or maybe you hit a certain stage in your comic reading habit, eventually you just go, I need to save that for later. And you take a screenshot or you take a photo with your phone. So I was just curious. But the other thing was, do you end up posting on Twitter or Goodreads while you're reading? Like as you're going through a series, maybe you're binging, maybe you're just reading a single issue or an OGN or a collection. Or do you go and post on Goodreads, whether that's just to rate things or on Twitter just to like kind of explain the ridiculousness or send a comment or a compliment to the creative team? Do you guys do any of that? I guess, Kate, you said you had some thoughts. So let's start with you.
Yeah. So when I was on Twitter, when I was on it, I would definitely tweet during reading, like especially like screenshot of a certain panel if I really liked it or was like super into it, and would like tag creators in it and stuff. But I don't do that now. And for Goodreads, I know people like Kate Lamphere on the show will actually rate and write about each single issue. And I tried that at first when I first started Goodreads, and was way too much for me. So I go on after finishing an arc, and I rate and add to I have like a Goodreads shelf per year for graphic novels. I add it to the shelf with the rating, and then do it for the like trade paperback version that has that arc in it instead of single issues. But I only do that at the end. I don't like track it as I read for comics at all, because I don't want a read by date on there, because that messes up my Goodreads like annual reading challenge, because I don't want comics on it.
I see. Kara, what about you?
I'm like on Goodreads, but I don't really use Goodreads, because until this year, the idea of keeping any kind of list of what I was reading made it feel too much like homework, like even writing about. So like for me, I'd just be like, oh, I want to read that book. I read the book, done. This year with the pandemic, because time is a construct and nothing matters, I started keeping a list in my journal of the things that I'm watching and the things that I'm reading, just so I know I'm actually doing something and not sitting still, like as a person.
Yeah.
Right,
even though physically I am sitting still, but my normal instinct is to not catalog in any way what media I'm consuming. That said, on Twitter, I definitely post if I'm reading something that is like completely ridiculous or that I have decided to task myself with reading. I've definitely done that a little less frequently since joining this podcast, because I find that I am more articulate and sometimes funnier talking than I am writing.
Sure.
And so like with the things like when Brian and I did our Star Wars miniseries, or Brian and Kate and I now doing Giant Days of Our Lives, like that's kind of like my deep dive analysis format, is through the medium of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I didn't have the show, I might have done like a Giant Days read through, just like posting favorite panels, like all in a long chain. And, you know, not necessarily for an audience, but just like for me to keep track of things.
Yeah, the book report feeling is why I don't ever write anything in the review section on Goodreads. I just give the stars, and the stars are not how good it is, but how much I enjoyed it. Like it's very different things sometimes of, was this good or was this horrible trash that I adored? So yeah, I totally get
it. That is exactly how I use a wine app I have on my phone. I only add, it's like one of those things where you like take pictures of the label of the wine and you can like read the ratings and like find out where to buy it or whatever. But I've only ever taken photos of wine where I have a glass and I'm like, this is great, I would drink this again. I have never referenced this list, but it's nice to know it's there if I do want to reference it.
One day you're going to be desperate to be like, I need a good wine, and now you're going to know, you're going to have that list.
But it's like, good is subjective, right? So it's like Kate was saying, she uses the stars to say, do I like it? So that was like, oh, that's exactly how I use Vivino.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to, and I've been terrible at it, using Goodreads the same way that I use Letterboxd, where Letterboxd I go and rate movies and stuff just because there's a whole community there of people who rate movies. But I want to use Goodreads for that with comics. But I actually need to just get better about it. Like when I finish a collection or finish an OGN, just go on, add my rating, maybe add a little bit of snarky review, and just call it good. Like I don't want to write an in-depth book report by any means, but I also log everything that I read to an Excel spreadsheet because, like Carrie, you were saying, like I just lose track of where I am with things, and I don't know, did I read issue 6? Did I read chapter 95? Like where did I last leave off? And sometimes apps don't sync well, so I just don't know. So I'd rather just have a single source of certainty to know where I last left off. So yeah. That's my only thing. I want to try to get more into reading or using Goodreads, especially with the Goodreads reading challenge coming up, which is being announced February 1st. This episode we're recording on the 31st. It'll be out on February 3rd. But the Goodreads, 2021 reading challenge is starting. I'm very excited, given the list of things that I've seen people add to this thing. It's very, very cool. And yeah, so I do want to try to use Goodreads more specifically for that, as well as other things in the future for this year, just to see how well it can go, get some of that Goodreads clout, and become an influencer. That's my ultimate goal, is quit my job, become an influencer, and only read comic books on TikTok. So you can look forward to that in 2021.
Will you be doing little dances while you review them?
Well,
I'll watch that.
You have to get into the trends in order to stay relevant. So yeah, I'll be doing all this stuff. You can, catch me on my Twitch stream, have an OnlyFans, all that kind of stuff. So
comic book reviews in the nude.
Comic book review, yeah, in the nude. Yes, exactly. Oh boy, this episode certainly got away from me from the get-go, and so I'm glad that we had this conversation, because I think that we've tackled a lot of things. I guess we could wrap things up here, unless you guys had any final thoughts about your very unique comic book habits.
I do have a final thought, and it's not about a comic book habit that I have, but one that I'd like to have.
Oh.
So some of our friend group and Goodreads folks have been doing the Pop Sugar reading challenge for reading, and I use it for like books, but not comics. And I know like you, Mike, and some other folks use it for comics, and I have been thinking like I've really enjoyed it for like kind of, I don't know why it's fun. It's just fun for doing with my reading, and I'm like, I should do this year with like do a separate list that's the same challenges but all comics, because I don't like the idea of mixing them so much.
Right.
But I really like the idea of doing it for that as a way to maybe even out some of my reading, so that I'm not just never or totally reading comics.
Right. Force yourself into that habit.
Some of my TBR, like 2021 is the year that I tackle my enormous digital TBR of like comics I purchased in sale bundles or like Humble Bundle and Comixology sales, that I just have like a ludicrous number of these that I've never read.
I'm excited for you to be the master of Humble Bundles this year, because I feel like you will be the first of this group to actually sit down and read their Humble Bundle books.
I don't jinx me like this, Michael. Like, come on.
If I don't put pressure on you now, it's never going to happen. All right, so
I'll never catch up.
Kara, any final thoughts from you?
Well, I started out this episode hating myself for being suckered into this weird medium, but now I feel like maybe I'm just gonna go read some comics now.
Hell yeah.
Like, I've come back. I got swept out of the pit of despair, and now I'm like, oh man, my collected editions are really nice. And in the chat, our listening pal Danny is reminding me of a manga called Drops of God that is about wine. How to bring my wine app story full circle. And I just discovered that it is included with Prime. So I've just delivered the first volume to my Kindle Fire and will be reading that. And that screen is like the size of a manga screen. So hopefully that'll be a seamless reading experience. So I'm feeling hopeful about comics again.
If it's not, you know who to bitch to. That Kindle guy.
Oh my gosh, so much pressure on me to make everyone's comic experience great. I guess I will take up the burden. Anyway,
you're the hero we deserve.
I'm trying. But thank you guys for doing this episode. This was really, really fun. Even if we got way off topic, that I love the conversation that we had today. So make sure that if you want to hear more of this wild stuff, make sure to follow Kara on Twitter. You can follow her at Kara S. Zam. You can follow me at Mike Rappin. You can follow the show at IRCB Podcast, and on Instagram, where I try to post fairly regularly. And I've got this new layout that I'm doing for all the covers of the episodes. So if you haven't checked that out yet, make sure to subscribe and check that out on your podcast catcher of choice, because it looks really, really cool.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive series like the I Read Comic Books Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. Our newest series is Giant Days of Our Lives, and I'm on that one, so join us at patreon.com/IRCB podcast.
If you haven't already, please rate and review our show. We feel like we deserve 5 stars, but whatever you think. On Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts, it really helps spread the word about IRCB. You can also join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more, and listen to our episodes live as we record at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. It would help us a lot if you tell your friends or your local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They just dropped a new single, which is fucking incredible. They do all the music, and we love them to death, and thank them for continuing to let us use their music. Xander is the editor of our show. He's also just like a fun person to talk to. He has just a whimsical, wonderful voice, and love hearing his voice on the internet. Until next time, I want to say thank you to Danny and Saint, who are hanging out with us on the Discord chat. Thank you to Kate and Kara for being on this episode. Thank you to everyone out there who listens to the show and shares it and tells their friends about it. We really, really appreciate it. Until next time, comics are good, and so are you.